get the Zoom link, they could go to our YouTube channel and see it. And then also it'll be housed there so they can go back and see it anytime they want.
All right, we are now live streaming to YouTube.
All right, so that means we're ready to go? Awesome. All right, thanks, Paul. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get started. My name is Amy Yersted, and I'm a member with the League of Women Voters of Eastern Upper Peninsula. And I want to say thank you to everyone who is joining us today, and I'm sure that there'll be more people that trickle in as we've seen in the past. This is the Lunch and Learn, so it's called Women Lead Lunch and Learn. So if that's not what you expected to get into, that's what you are here for right now. And we're glad that you have come. The idea is that the League of Women Voters, if you're unfamiliar with the organization, it's a nonpartisan organization, which means it does not support or oppose candidates or parties. But we do believe that women have a role in our democracy. And so what we can, even though we're a nonpartisan organization, we do believe that the League has a role in developing women to run and lead their communities and at all levels of government. And so this is our third in our Lunch and Learn series, Women Lead. And we're really just trying to learn about what it's like to be a woman and run. The first one, if you were able to see that event, that was with Dr. Schaefer O'Connell. And she talked about, she's a political scientist, and part of what she teaches is women in politics. And so she studied a lot about, you know, women running in politics, serving in politics, and what that's like. So if you haven't seen that one, I recommend going to our YouTube channel. The most recent one we had was the mayor of Marquette. So we really wanted to see from a local standpoint, as well as in the UP, what's it like for someone who's a woman running for and then serving as the mayor. And so she shared her insight, and she had a lot of great tips to give us as well. And so today we have our very special guest, Joanne Galloway, who's also a League member and has been for quite some time. And Joanne ran for the 107th district, which is where the Eastern Upper Peninsula, this is our district. And so it was in 2018, and she ran a awesome, tough campaign. And so we wanted to learn from her some specific things, actually. We wanted to better understand what it's like to get endorsements and how difficult that is, fundraising in a rural area, as well as how to make those connections. Because we have geography as one of the big hurdles for people when they're running for office in our area. So we wanted to see how was she able to overcome, or what lessons she learned, if she ever wanted to do it again, or had insight for others who want to run. What kind of advice does she have? So Joanne, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, let's get this conversation started. If anybody has questions, feel free to use the chat box. And also, if you wanted to unmute yourself, you see a lull in our conversation, feel free to pipe in. This is a very conversational lunch. And so we want to make sure that people feel like they can participate in this conversation. Joanne has a lot of experience. And so I want to make sure that you get both, all of you, as well as Joanne, gets the most out of this opportunity. So Joanne, I'm going to say, if you wanted to share a little bit about yourself first, like why did you decide to run for the 107th? I could think that would be a great start.
Sure, absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. It's interesting in this mode that we're in with recording that I'm so used to like being able to see myself on the Zoom screen, but I can't see myself right now. So I'm looking at my friend Amy, who I'm here across the table from having lunch. So thank you for joining us. So this is pretty fun. I am coming to you from my home in Lansing today. And, you know, one of the resounding things that I said a million times in 2018 is I never planned to run for office. And I didn't. I never saw myself as a candidate. Definitely was not a goal. And the real short answer of why did you run is because no one else did. And so definitely, I know I've moved into an area now where my work is really going to center this year around increasing civic engagement. And I just really feel like people just need to have an opportunity to observe their elected officials and just start to get involved in the process a little bit. And I feel like it's really important that the motivation to run for office come from within. So it does, so that it would not coming from who's going to run? Will you run for office? Not from that outward pressure, but from someone observing and seeing the process and becoming comfortable that they're good enough. And understanding that no matter the elected office, there are supports that are in place from the day you're elected to prepare you for the job that you need to do. So whether it's somebody who has a full-time position in the county who makes sure that all of the county commissioners have all the documentation that they need prior to a meeting so that they can make a good decision, or whether it's the Michigan Association of Counties, who holds a new member training every election cycle to train new people who have been elected to county. Same thing happens at all different levels, whether it's state representative or township or city or all those types of things. So
I think that's a great point, Joanne. I think that basically what you're saying is that one, the motivation should be from inside, but don't let your lack of ever of actually been in office stop you, because there are going to be trainings and support that once you get there, once you're elected, you'll be able to learn on the job and with actual formalized training. So don't let not knowing be the thing that stops you.
Yep.
That's
so just
great.
maybe a little bit more about my background. Before running for office, my husband and I owned a farm in Pickford, and we were both full-time farmers. But I always was involved in things in the community where I might see like something needed to be done, whether it was a fitting and showing clinic for, kids that wanted to show animals at the fair, or whether it was several small farmers who had little flocks of sheep and wanted to be able to shear their own sheep, but they didn't know how. I like coordinated a fitting and show, or a sheep shearing clinic, and brought in a professional to show them how to do that. Or, filling the void for farmers who had product to sell and people who were looking for local foods, and starting a farmer's market and promoting it. So how I got involved in politics is, I almost like the word politics to me has kind of a negative connotation. So I do try to stay away from it. I, like to refer to people as our elected officials, and refer to it as running for office, and kind of stay away from the whole politics word. So
as someone who teaches politics, embrace it. It's about influence, right? It's compromise, it's influence, it is power, but power is not bad, right? Women have power. We have unique power, and so I think it's okay to harness that. Just and it's unfortunate we've become so divisive today. I don't think that was ever intended. Certainly, the founders of our country and the Constitution did not anticipate politics to be the way that it is today. But that's another class. So today is all about you. So you ran for the 107th. You are a former life, you were a farmer. So you made a big jump between becoming a farmer to running for a state office. So what was the issue? What was the big jump that got you to do that? Because for a lot of us, it would be a very scary thing to just say, you know what, I am running for 107th. I am going to go and try to unseat. And at the time it was an incumbent, if I'm not mistaken, right? So,
right.
And Speaker of the House. What made you decide what got that fire in your belly to say, I'm going to go and do this?
Yeah. Well, very definitively, it was based around issues. Okay. And feeling like we weren't being represented by our elected official. And I don't think today we need to get into those issues in particular, but it was just, it was a very polar situation, and we just felt it was important that somebody run for office. And also I was very committed. So I was planning to run for county commission in Chippewa County I'd actually filed to run for county commission, but no one was running, there was someone running, because I did have a primary challenger, but we had a grassroots organization that had formed kind of a candidate recruitment committee. And we had interviewed a woman out of Petoskey who gave a lot of really serious consideration to running for the seat. And had she run, we would have supported her. And then there was my primary component, Kurt Perrin, was running, and we just didn't feel like we could support him. And so that's why we went ahead and wanted to field a challenger. And, one day somebody just said to me, they're like, well, different ones that I asked, have you thought about running? Have you thought about running? Do you know anybody who'd be interested in running? On occasion, somebody would say back to me, have you thought about running? And it's like, no, I haven't thought about running. But then finally one day somebody said to me, you really need to think about running. You have a lot of street cred. I'm like, street cred, like what's that? They're like, well, like you've been a 4-H leader and your kids are in 4-H and you're, have students in the local school and you're a farmer and you do all this stuff around the community. I'm like, oh, okay. You'd be somebody that people would support. So, I went home and talked to Gary about it, my husband, because that's one thing that's really important running for office. You have absolutely got to have the support of your family. And, if your family's not in a position to be able to support that, then that's something you really need to take into consideration and, think again about whether you can run for office. And in our situation, it was Gary and I ran this farm together. And we were starting to adjust some things, starting to look at what's going to be our next phase in life. So things were positioned to where it made it a little bit easier for one person to operate the farm in 2018, but he did absorb a lot of extra work, and that was his way of supporting the race. So he didn't give it money, he didn't go knock doors, you never saw his face, maybe once or twice, but he was home fixing his own meals, keeping up the laundry for the two of us. So it was really interesting. By the 1st of June in 2018 through the election day in November, that's all I did was the campaign. So some mornings I would get out of bed, I would land in a chair, I'd open up the computer, and next thing you'd know, it'd be 11 o'clock. And it was just all this communications and coordination and learning, like trying to figure things out. And that's one thing that we really left the campaign with was there's a lot of institutional knowledge that doesn't exist in northern Michigan. Because we are so far from the center where a lot happens in Michigan across Detroit and Lansing and Grand Rapids, that a lot of the questions that we would ask, no one really knew for sure what the answer was to them. And so that also just, increased that we needed to do a lot of work to figure things out. So, but again, there's resources available. And so for a state house race, and I didn't realize this before running for office just because I had never thought about it. So the state house on both the Democratic side and the Republican side have a caucus. And each of those caucuses have employees that are there. As elected officials come and go, these employees are there maintaining stability. And so that's who supports a state house race. So the support comes less from the actual state party, at least on the Democratic side where my experience is. I don't know for sure about the Republican side. The support comes from the state house caucus. And on the Democratic side, they have somebody who specializes year-round, regardless of the cycles, the election cycle, in supporting candidates. And by supporting, I mean providing a training manual and doing regular, providing messaging that you can adopt or, work into your own messaging kind of thing, financial information for your treasurer, and, so just a lot of support that way. And then also financially, that's where a lot of the money can come from.
That's really interesting. I think that sometimes that's like an insider thing that somebody who wants to run wouldn't know that there's a caucuses who are there to support people who are running for office. I really had just recently, someone had sent me a booklet for, it was the department, the Board of Education at the state level, I think it is. They have a booklet that shows people how to run for their local Board of Education. And so it sounds like there's a lot of these books or booklets or online sites or people who have okay, there we go. So what I want to get into, since, okay, so as you've decided to join, jump in the race, you're going to run. And when you're learning as you go, because you've never run before, what was it like to drive around the Eastern Upper Peninsula, the 107th District, and what was it like to do fundraising in that kind of space? Because we know here in the Eastern Upper Peninsula, and even in just the UP as a whole, we are really spread out, and we certainly don't have as much, fluid money going around like as if maybe they would have downstate. So, we're very much, as there's a lot of farmers, we're a lot of, middle class people, and so it's already difficult up here as it is. So if you're running for office and you're asking people for, money that maybe we need a little more than a little longer than other folks, like, how did you do that? How did you go around and get endorsements? How did you do your fundraising and meet people?
So just very directly about the fundraising side of it, I ran my campaign that it should be of statewide interest. So the elected representative from the 107th, while he might represent the constituents of that district, that representative's vote affects everyone in this state. So from that standpoint, like I actually feel like there's some movement going on across our country where some of the big funders are recognizing these forgotten about districts and handpicking and funding candidates more on the Republican side than the Democratic side. So I worked to get contributions from a larger area than just from the district.
Okay.
And then, so the other thing that was interesting looking back later, and this is just like a quick reference, but the Sarah Cambenzi race in what would that be, the Marquette area in general.
109th District.
109th, thank you, yeah. Her 2018 campaign report is by and large made up of union contributions. I don't think she had a single individual who gave a maxed out donation, which was $1,000 per individual or like $2,000 for a couple. Where my financial looked different than that. I didn't have any union money, and we'll get into that in a minute as to how that played out. And I had, my number of contributors was way higher than Sarah's number of contributors, but a much lower average donation. I think my average donation was $50, which there was a lot of $25 donations, but that was brought up by the fact I had 7 what they call max donors that gave $1,000 each. So that kind of like skewed that direction. Yeah.
And those were across the state or in just Eastern Upper Peninsula?
The donations? They could have been from anywhere in the country.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah, certainly there was plenty of people from in the district. We have one member who's joined here today who lives in Pennsylvania. And has a seasonal home in Emmett County who knocked doors with me, contributed to my campaign. And so that's always of interest to me too, is there's people that have an interest in what happens in Northern Michigan because they know it affects them, even if this isn't their home and that elected representative doesn't represent them.
So when you were doing, you said you didn't get the unions, and so what was the endorsement process like? Like how would you do that?
The endorsement process is just, it's crazy. So I don't know how many people on this call have recently had a family member apply for financial aid for college, especially through I'm not going to be able to think of it, but there's a standardized college application form that's used by many universities around the country, the Common App, that you can fill out. And then maybe an individual college has like 1 or 2 essay questions on it that's different than the rest of it. So we dreamed by the end that the political fundraising entity would start to have a standardized application, like the common application for college, because they all have their own application and they all have their own essay questions. And some are electronic and online, some are paper and they're mailed to you. So literally, I swear if I had them all together in one place, it was a 3 feet tall stack of mail that was endorsement applications. And those endorsements can range from an organization who's just simply looking to give you an endorsement but doesn't have a lot of money to potentially somebody. I didn't get into it enough actually with the unions and with these types of donations to even know what the limit would have been. But where you have that $1,000 per person limit, that totally changes when it's an organization. So I don't know, maybe the unions can, maybe it's like $10,000 is the max that they can give. And keeping in mind, when we talk about maxes that different entities can give to a campaign. Each campaign type, like a state level campaign, has different requirements than federal, like on the congressional level. And I think like the county or township levels might even be different than that. So,
Yeah, so good point for everybody to remember is that make sure if you are going to run for office or you're helping someone run for office that you know those campaign finance rules. Make sure you know all the limits for individuals, unions, organizations, corporations, and how often you're allowed to give. So don't get yourself or the candidate in any trouble. Make sure you know the rules.
And they're easy to find out. They're right on the Secretary of State website. So it's not hidden. It's not a whole year's course to learn it or anything. It's very easy.
Yeah, we actually, for the League of Women Voters of Eastern Upper Peninsula, we actually have some links on our Women Lead. If you go to our menu, so on our website, you go to the menu and you go to Women Lead, we have some links to the Secretary of State with exactly this information. So we want to make sure that nobody gets themselves in any hot water and that you run a good campaign that is open, transparent, and you can track the money and you know how to get the information for that money. So
I think the other thing that's important to just add on there, Amy, is, and I think early on endorsements to me meant like endorsements, like here's our rubber stamp, we approve of Joanne. But then I learned over time that's a lot more than that. That, like, say Michigan Education Association, if you were to gain their endorsement, then they actually support all the candidates that they endorse by like providing like actual printed literature or a mailing, or they organize, and this is the type of thing we don't see that much in Northern Michigan, but the Michigan Education Association would organize their members to potentially do like door knocking.
So it's probably good to ask. I mean, I'm guessing if you have 3 feet high of endorsements and you only have so much time, and we know from research, and as Dr. Schaefer O'Connell had told us before, that it's important women have to be heard. We have to be told to run 5 times at least. And then that door knocking is probably one of the most successful ways to get people to get out and vote. So you only have so much time, and you need to make sure you prioritize their time. And you can't fill out all of these endorsements, especially since they're all different. You need to find out which endorsements are going to be able to help you in your campaign. So if they can provide canvassers or financial funding where you could maybe even give stipends to canvassers, those would probably be at the top of your list, I would imagine.
Right, yeah, and that's where like the support of the House Caucus can be helpful, in that they actually would have you submit an endorsement application you got so that they could answer all the questions with what, a typical candidate, different messaging that would make sense. And then you could use it like as a template to complete your own.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you were doing
the idea of like who's doling out the most support and the most money, like they potentially could have a list like that. And if not, it would be a good thing to be developed.
Yeah. So like a list of would you have a list of priority organizations? Like these are groups, or these are organizations that I would say are like my top 20 that I want to seek out and fill out their application for endorsement. If I can get to the rest, then I will. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to try to prioritize it for sure. Okay, so then what about networking and trying to meet people where they're at in such a difficult area, since we're all spread out in the UP? Like how were you able to do that? And then I know that we had talked on the phone in the past, and like meeting people isn't necessarily like, hey, will you come and like, I want to give you a tour of, of this, this facility. And a tour isn't necessarily a tour, but that could be code of like, this is a way to develop supporters. We need, it'd be good of you to come and meet them. So come on, it's not just a tour. But at the time you said that you were new and you didn't know that.
Yeah, so one of my campaign supporters had talked about setting up a tour of the corrections facility. And I had responded with, well, I don't like need to see the facility. Like I have no knowledge to like judge whether it's a good facility or I just don't need to know that information right now. Like we have a limited amount of time. I said, but I would love, like if there was going to be a meeting of, like corrections officers or like the union, I would be happy. I'd love the opportunity to like speak to them. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that word tour is used in terms of, well, like getting a different vision. Touring the facility means you are walking by the cook cooking in the kitchen, or the whatever all the different positions are, they're walking you past all these people, and then they are introducing you to all these people as you would quote unquote tour through the facility. And so my opponent, I know, toured one of our corrections facilities twice during the campaign season. So yeah, so I think
Did you
that's an
make it?
important thing
Did
for
you
people
make
to
it to
know.
the tour? You did not. No.
No, I
Oh,
was,
see, and
yeah,
now you
I
would
was
have.
busy running a different direction. So like to talk more about like how I met a lot of people where they were at in
Yeah.
terms of like thinking of individuals. Our campaign did open an office in St. Ignace so that we had that like launch point there. And then, so oftentimes I would drive to St. Ignace, and then I always had a driver wherever we were going. So the driver took the responsibility of knowing where we were going for sure, when we needed to be there, how to get there, those types of things. And I was able to concentrate on what am I going to say when I get there, or, just taking care of other details, on the phone and communication and social media and answering emails and stuff like that while we traveled. But ultimately we could see where having three people in a car all the time would be perfect. So you've got one to drive, and you've got one to be taking notes, and then the candidate to like be doing the thinking and spewing out the ideas and that kind of thing. So yeah.
It really is like nonstop then. In other words, like even when the
Totally.
car is going, you are still on the job.
Totally, yeah. Well, and then the other thing is if you'd like to know exactly where connectivity is best between St. Ignace and Petoskey, I mean, like it's so in out, or at least it was in 18, that like if you waste a minute when you have connection, you don't have time to have the phone call before you get to the next spot where the signal's going to drop. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my, it's a science, really.
Right.
So I'm going to start opening it up to questions. If people have any questions for Joanne about her experience running for the 107th, we'd love to hear them. You can either unmute yourself or you can put it into the chat feature. But I've asked my main questions, which is about endorsements, fundraising, and trying to do the work on the road, especially since we live in such a far away place. I guess, Joanne, as we're waiting for people to think of questions, what do you think are like lessons learned? So we know that a tour means a tour really means is meeting a lot of people at one time. So that seems like that was a lesson learned. What are some other lessons learned? So for people who are thinking about running or who are going to help others run for office, now that you have done it, your experience, what would you say, like, this is what I wish I would have done. This is what you should do when you decide to run.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, we've covered quite a bit of that already by talking about the endorsements, talking about the commitment of family to have their support. And certainly, I guess another thing that was really instrumental is that I came into running for office as part of a group of people that were already working together. So like we had an initiative in earlier 2018 where people had come together and created a group around writing letters to the editor. And so that brought, coalesced some people together. And then we also had formed some groups that were supporting each other and their concerns following the prior election cycle. And so, we brought people together over shared and common concerns. And that's, really one thing going forward, like to today, that I've learned that is so important is anytime you do any type of organizing work, and even, to me, the word organizing, I didn't know it was a professional like term until just in the last couple of years. But that's when I called up my 10 neighbors and said, hey, would you all like be interested in a sheep shearing clinic? And they said yes. So now it's important that these are your people. And so it's important to make sure that you are organizing and documenting their contact information and keeping and, noting some type of note about what their interests are or something, because the way we're going to all change the world is not by ourselves. It's by working with others who are sympathetic to our causes. And so developing that database of having that information together so that the next thing that comes up, you're not left scrambling to remember how to get a hold of all these people or who they all were. You now can just go to your email account or your contacts or whatever, all of them that were coded, I care about internet, and you can send them all an email. So
I think that's a great point. And you're absolutely right. in the course of your life, you meet so many people with so many different interests, and different, they touch that relationship in different ways. And it's important to make sure we remember the name and remember what it was that they cared about. So being a former farmer, you have a lot of people who are probably care about agriculture and agriculture policy. And so that would be one group of people. Similarly, connectivity sounds like another group of people. And so remembering what all these people different issues are, and having them in a safe place. I know that there's a lot of apps that they create for phones now, or when you meet someone instantly, you can put their name, their phone number, and maybe a couple of different points about what you walked away from that relationship. So it sounds like to try to make sure we stay organized and stay intentional about the people we meet, because our paths might cross and we might need help, or they might need help. And so I think that's a really great point.
I see some questions coming in with the chat, and I have something I want to say that'll address a couple of them. We haven't really talked about campaign finance yet at this point, okay? So typically with a political campaign, you hear people asking about like the funds that have been raised by that candidate. But as I've gotten more involved in the larger scene, I can see where races are influenced by what we would call dark money. And just to be clear, I don't support dark money, and I would love for us to have a real short, concise election cycle where everybody's given the same amount of money to run for their race, say, for example. But I also am really big into just tell me the rules and I will run by them. I will follow them. Whatever the current rules are, like if that's the game we're playing, then we should all play the same game. And so that we're all on the same level field. But from that standpoint, like I feel like the word PAC or super PAC has become like really demonized. But yet I noticed a race over in the 110th I guess it would have also been in 2018. So the total amount my campaign raised was, I think, $52,000. Sarah Cambenzi's was around 150. And then this race to the west showed that they had raised like $20,000. And I'm like, and he got elected. He was a Republican that got elected over there. And I thought, it just doesn't make sense. But then that's what caused me to think about, yes, but so like money that would come from the House caucus, they are technically a PAC or super PAC. And so that House caucus cannot coordinate with the candidate as to what marketing they're going to do in that district, what that exact messaging is going to say. There's what they call a firewall between those two organizations. And so I'm pretty sure that candidate that was elected and is currently serving in the 110th probably had a lot of support from another entity that was not his own political campaign. So I've really found the whole PACs, super PACs, and as a matter of fact, excuse me, so like I'm currently the executive director for the Center for Change, which is an organization that was built out of my campaign so we could continue to do the work that we wanted to do, even though we didn't have an elected official that represented us. We are organized legally as a 501c4 nonprofit. There's also 501c3s. 501c3s cannot do any political work. A 501c4 can spend up to 50% of its operating budget either endorsing candidates and announcing the endorsement of candidates, or doing political work that would be calling out an elected official and like publicly talking about that. So accountability work is what that is called. Like the organization Progress Michigan here in Michigan does a lot of accountability work.
So it's important to know which organizations, what their IRS tax code is, and what they can and cannot do. I'm glad you mentioned this, because we, as the league, we are working with other leagues across the state, and we actually have an event about dark money in politics that is coming up next Wednesday at 7 p.m. So if you're interested in campaign finance in Michigan, then come back and join us at 7 next Wednesday on Zoom. So thanks for letting me break in there.
So I just wanted to touch base real quick. Nikki mentions that she wondered if I plan to run again. I feel like I could do a lot of great work without being an elected official. So it's so interesting to me when you look at the dynamics of government, okay? Like I have a lot of empathy for a Democratic senator or representative in Michigan at this point in time with how polar our politics are, that the first time I went and sat in on a committee hearing at the Capitol here in Lansing, I went away with, wow, those people are still sitting down at a computer every day working on writing policy that they believe in, that they're documenting and getting on the record to help other people understand how they think and feel and how they think things should be, even though every committee in our legislature, because the Republicans have more elected officials than the Republicans have or the Democrats have in Michigan, every single committee in the legislature has more Republicans on it than Democrats. So every day they go into work and they might present some potential policy at a committee hearing, knowing that it's very unlikely that it will ever actually become law, because all the Republicans vote with the Republicans and all the Democrats vote with the Democrats. And the thing that I've even seen going forward is on occasion you'll see somebody breaks rank, and all of that has been discussed in their caucus meeting ahead of time. And if either side knows they don't have the votes and they're not going to win, then they can let a few of their members vote with the other party to keep their constituents in their district feeling good about their elected representative. Because they knew they weren't going to get the vote anyway. So Sarah Cambenzi, go vote with the Republicans. That's okay. I'm just saying, using that as an example. I feel like I just got a little off task there.
I mean, I guess it's an inside scoop of with your nonprofit work. It sounds like you get the inside view of what's happening, and as they say, the sausage being made. And sometimes this is the work that's happening in government. And I study at the national level, and the same thing happens in parties in power. And currently, it's the same dynamic at both your state and your national. And so it is. I think this part has been probably going on for quite a long time.
So we have the question from Kathy wondering about what volunteers can do to best support a candidate. And interestingly, I mean, it's going to depend on the candidate, but I mean, it can be fixing meals so they're home, so they're at the house when the candidate gets home, or the family needs to be fed. I mean, sometimes it's just that simple. There seems to be a lot of belief that knocking doors and talking with individuals is very effective for campaigning. So certainly getting out and knocking doors and doing that is super helpful. And also, I mean, whatever connections any individual has where they could connect that candidate that they support. So whether that's with a neighborhood group or a parent group at the school or your union at work or whatever it might be, I mean, those connections can be very helpful that way. The other question that she asked was whether I thought it was better to have a campaign manager or potentially like a team of workers. So our situation we coalesced into, we had like a leadership team for the campaign that consisted of about 15 people that met, if you're going to believe this, every week, every Sunday for months. Yeah. And the other thing that's really interesting is in rural areas, it's hard to find a campaign manager. So just to really drive it home for how different the geographics of the district are, is in 2018, they were also looking for a candidate to run for Senate for our area up there. And Curtis Hertel was the head of the Democratic Senate caucus. And his district is here around Lansing where I'm at. And it is literally, are you guys ready for this? A half hour from any one side of his district to the other. Like here in Lansing, when I leave my house on the east side of Lansing to go to something on the west side of Lansing, I have literally traveled in 3 state house districts. 3 state house districts just by driving across town.
Yeah, it definitely certainly shows you how
So
hard.
so he tried to tell me, you could run for the 37th Senate and still work. And it's like, I was trying to even imagine serving as a 37th senator. Think of Wayne Schmidt. He works in Lansing. Tuesday through Thursday, keep in mind, is when the House and Senate are actually in session sometimes during the year, not every week. Tuesday through Thursday. So then if but he lives in Traverse City. But imagine if, like, living in Pickford, if I ever wanted to be in what would be a major population center of that district, I would have to go all the way over to Traverse City. And by the time you drove up there, met with people, you'd be close to wanting to spend the night before you headed over to Pickford, So,
I mean, that's over a 6-hour day.
yeah,
I mean, because 3 hours driving just to get there, and then hanging out, getting to know people, and then you got to drive 3 hours back.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think that people underestimate the challenges of trying to run for office in the Upper Peninsula. Absolutely. I mean,
So anyway, there's not a lot of campaign managers sitting around waiting for a job. Like, who lives in Sault Ste. Marie that's that's got experienced campaign manager that's waiting to, run a state house race, they just
so if
don't
someone wanted
exist.
to run or become a campaign manager, what would you say that how should they get started in that career track? Do you have any?
That's a really good question, because, and this just might be me personally, but oftentimes I see things happen in, like, running a political campaign. To me, because my background's in advertising and public relations, that's all it is. It's an advertising and public relations campaign that you've put all these different terms on to make it a political campaign. And so I brought in my lifetime friend who recently stepped down from marketing at Sears Corporation, and he ran my campaign. So advertising and marketing, expert.
So really, it could be, I mean, so marketing, someone who, like, maybe someone out of college who just graduated with a communications degree or a business degree even as well. So people who maybe even been a business owner, because businesses have to try to get their brand out. So essentially, the candidate is the brand, and the campaign manager is the person who is trying to get that brand out into the community. It's probably a lot of relationship building. So someone who might be, fairly charismatic, someone can remember names and help the candidate with that. But the big thing is public relations and meeting people and getting it out into the media. So having a lot of media connections, I would imagine, is another one.
Yeah, well, and just the technology,
Yeah.
knowing how to use technology, whether it's the database that's got, so, like, door knocking, it's not go knock on every door. Do you really want your opposition to be alerted to the fact there's an election coming up? Not so much. So that's where, at least on the Democratic side, it's called the Voter Access Network, or VAN. And you can, like, identify geographical areas where you think that you might want to go knock on doors. And then they have, like, scored everybody who's in the database in terms of whether they lean Republican or lean Democrat. And you can choose, like, what type of person you want to knock on the doors for. A lot of them are independents. So a lot of times people feel like, well, we could win this if we could pull some of the independents our way. So it might be common to go in and knock the doors of all the people who are ranked independent. So you don't go down the street just knocking on every door and leaving your literature at every door. You use, sometimes it's a paper list, or VAN is also available as an app for a phone now that pulls up a map and has red dots at each one. And so starting to, like, plug into some different organizations and getting some training about some of the different technology tools that are available, or learning how to put together a concise story, like, you've got 5 minutes, what do you want to tell us, and what do you want to leave us with, kind of thing.
Right. No, I think that's great. I think those are all good things for a campaign manager to get into. And if anybody here is considering or knows somebody who would make a great campaign manager, you don't have to go to college to be a campaign manager. You just really need to be great at relationship building, maybe have, like, kind of a strategic mind about, what kind of voters that we're looking for. And then just really good at marketing. And since so many people use social media nowadays, that's really the biggest probably marketing piece, is using social, and then having, local newspapers, especially if it's a local race.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get Paul's question. We have less than 15 minutes left in our conversation, but Paul has a great question, especially for Women Lead series. So thank you, Paul. So Joanne, do you feel that being a woman candidate poses extra challenges in your run for office?
So I don't know if it's just me personally, or if there wasn't, but I didn't pick up on how it would have been different if I had been a man. Like, there was never a moment where I was like, yeah, if that would have been a man, that would have been different. But maybe I just am not perceptive enough to always pick up on that.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. Yeah, well, there you go, Paul. She didn't feel like it was that different. I think Dr. Schaefer O'Connell and research might say differently, but maybe we just don't all experience it the same.
Right, yeah.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Everybody's been asking a lot of great questions. I love about the one about the campaign manager. Anything else? So we covered a lot: endorsements, fundraising, campaign finance, trying to make sure, traveling across the UP and meeting people and knowing that sometimes language isn't the same. So like a tour doesn't necessarily mean a tour. So we all take in language differently. Looks like Marge posted, Michigan Political Leadership Program is for politicians and campaign managers from Michigan State University. So there's a link in there. So for anybody who is interested in maybe becoming a campaign manager or wants to, help somebody else become a campaign manager, it sounds like there's already through the Michigan State University a program. So that sounds wonderful.
That's an excellent program. I've run into several people who've completed that program. Tina DeMore, who's an attorney in Petoskey, has been through that program. There's another gal from Petoskey who's a nurse practitioner who's completed that program. And everybody has had a lot of really good things to say about it. One thing that's interesting about it is it brings both Republicans and Democrats together in a training and helps them to learn how to work together. And, part of what they do is like follow, also like understanding how the legislature works, like following a bill from like how's the policy written and what's the whole process before it becomes law.
Oh my gosh, that needs to be advertised all the time on every single telephone pole. That's wonderful. I love that. All right. Paul actually asked, did door knocking help you to learn more about the issues in the minds of voters in the district?
Well, the one thing that's really interesting to me about door knocking is about 90% of the doors you knock are not home. So by and large, door knocking becomes lit dropping, which is another strategy, by the way, lit dropping. There's a thing where you just literally don't knock the doors and you just go out and get the literature rolled up under all their front doors or stuck in their chain link fence or whatever the situation might be. But yeah, so really we didn't have a ton of conversations. And even, I don't know, by and large, like when I spoke at various events that I was invited to speak at, people are pretty polite with you. Nobody ever tried doing a I'm gonna get you type of question, or I don't know, people just were generally very respectful. I will also say that I was not ever really in any venues where I expected there to be a lot of opposition. Now this was something I had a lot of fun with because I have a history of showing animals and being a part of the Chippewa County Fair my entire life. And so I did have a booth at the county fair that year. And so that was really interesting. And some people just weren't comfortable even, engaging and just would walk right on by. And and most people, if they were going to be oppositional, didn't bother to strike up a conversation. But I maybe had a couple conversations that allowed me to, suggest something that might have been something new to that person or whatever. But.
Okay. We do know there has been some research that folks don't like, especially new voters might not come out if they've never met the candidates or if no candidates have ever come to their door. And so like being at the fair is probably a great opportunity for people who haven't voted before to have that opportunity to come and talk to you and maybe even learn about the voting process. And so that's good to hear that some folks would stop and want to chat.
And we hosted a meet and greet in Detour at the Main Sale restaurant and packed the dining room.
Oh, wow.
We had like 40 to 50 people that came out for that. So that was just a lot of fun. And like no one had knocked on doors there or come to their community in, eons.
When it sounds crazy right now in the time of COVID to have 50 people packed in a room, that just sounds like a vacation.
Yeah, sounds fun.
I miss those. Let's see. We have a question. Is this being recorded? It absolutely is being recorded. So thanks for that, Christine. You can catch it on the leagues. We'll have this uploaded on our website very soon. And it's also on our league YouTube channel. So LWV EUP Michigan. we have a bunch of series, and this is the third for the Women Lead, and we'll have one more with State Representative Sarah Camsby coming up on the last day of April, same time at noon. So you can catch that. And it looks like Marge, she said that she is a fellow of that Michigan State University program. So very cool, Marge.
Good job.
Gosh, we should have you on this program so that we can pick your brain about what that was like.
That's a great idea.
Let's see, anything else? Is there any other burning questions that folks have? We've just a couple minutes left. I don't think I have any. Was finding out how to even just put your name on the ballot, was that pretty easy for you?
Yeah, so all that information of how you file to run for office is on the Secretary of State website. I don't know if it's on there today because I tried to find it last week and I didn't see it. And I wondered if they've held off on putting it up because of the redistricting process. Like, I don't even know if you wanted to file today, if you could, because like to run for 2022, because they expect the districts to change before then. So I haven't read up on like how they're handling that, but typically at some point, all that information is available on the Secretary of State website. And it's interesting that like running for county commissioner, you have the option to like pay a small fee to get on the ballot, or get, I think it's 10 signatures is all you need to get on the ballot.
Oh, wow.
For a state representative, again, you can pay a fee. I think it was $150, but it's refundable if you actually are on the ballot. And then, or you could collect, I don't remember now how many signatures it was because I was pretty close to the deadline, so I just wanted to go file. I didn't want to take the time to collect signatures. And then just interestingly, for a congressional race, they are not allowed to just pay money to get on the ballot. They have to collect signatures ahead of time.
Show
And it's
public support.
hundreds of signatures. It's quite a few actually. So yeah.
Hey, that's not such a bad thing, probably, because it just shows that there's people that already support this person. So
Yeah, and one other thing I thought was really interesting about filing is, so for the county, for county commission, you file at the county office. But for a state representative, you have to appear in person at a special Secretary of State's office that's in the building right west of the Capitol in Lansing.
all candidates have
All
to do that.
candidates. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is okay. That is good to know. So for anybody who wants to run, you will have to go down to Lansing to go to a special office.
And that's where the State House caucus membership or candidate support staff came in handy, is they helped fill out that application. And the guy literally walked us over to the Secretary of State office and stayed with us while we did the paperwork there. So.
Oh, that's nice to know that you have some supports there. So, okay, well, that doesn't sound scary. Okay,
Doesn't need to be scary at all. We had a great
everybody
lunch
should run for office.
Washington Square afterwards. It was fun.
There you go. All right, last question. This is a good one. So Paul and then Megan, she dittos it. In what ways has the experience of campaigning changed you as a person? Would you recommend running in a political campaign to others who might be interested? This is a perfect question to wrap up our conversation.
There you go.
Thanks,
Well,
Paul.
I do want to just reflect that for years running a farm, and we, sold meat to customers. I knew all of them. And I knew all their personal stories. I could tell the butcher how they'd want things cut and wrapped and packaged because I knew how many people they were feeding in their household and all these little personal details, right? Then when we started selling product at the farmer's market, it came to where sometimes I'd wait on a customer and they're like, well, yeah, I buy stuff from you all the time. And I'm like, how could I not recognize your face and know your name? It personally hurt me like that. I was uncomfortable with that. Like I wanted to know them. And then I ran for office. And fortunately, people are very gracious, but there is no way on this planet I could tell you and recognize everyone I met in 2018. That's been just absolutely crazy. So repeat the question for me, because I know I focused on just one small part of it.
No, that's all right. So what ways has the campaign experience changed you as a person? And then how would you recommend running for other people running?
Yeah. So running for office has entered me into a world that I didn't even know exist or imagine like what it could all be like. And entering into the whole nonprofit world, I had no idea. And there's a lot of money in nonprofits that are supporting people for all types of reasons all over this country. And so it's just, there's a ton of opportunity there. And yeah, it's a whole new world. We're having
Well,
fun
and
with it.
I'm going to add to just because Joanne, I've known you for a while, and I remember going to a political meeting, and it was only four of us in the room, and I recall you letting Gary kind of take the role for you as a couple, and you were like, no, Gary's the one that kind of does the politics in our home, and so that was, I don't know, maybe around 2015 or so, and or maybe it was at 2012. So the evolution between 2012 up until 2018 was a very big evolution for you. I mean, it was really transformative when you say, you really weren't into politics. You're just kind of going for the car ride. And then now you are the executive director for a non-profit organization who has run for a state house. I would think that politics as a person and running for office transformed who you are. Now you are politically aware, inspiring others, and really trying to make Michigan better for the rest of us. So that's pretty amazing.
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, I just I love those kinds of stories, and the fact that I got to see you grow into who you are is really awesome.
So this afternoon, I have the opportunity to meet with some of your leadership from Chippewa County, talking about money that's coming in for internet. And interestingly, I went back to an email from 2014 where I, as a farm business owner in Pickford, reached out to one of my favorite county commissioners, Don McLean, and had been asking, well, I'd asked multiple people, like, what are we doing about improving internet here? And at that time, the answer I would get talked about how Lighthouse had applied for a grant a few years before, but they didn't get it. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's then. What are we doing now? But no one knew what we were doing now. So Don worked with me, and we brought together Jeff Hagan with regional planning. We brought together Jason Kronemeyer with the EUP ISD. They brought in Tom Stevenson with Connect Michigan. And we convened a meeting right there in Sault Ste. Marie that all of the internet providers for the area, Charter and CenturyLink, and all of those providers came, as well as leadership from the hospital and the university there, and just community members. It was a community-led meeting, and I chaired the meeting and basically had them update everybody in the room on like what's happening, what's out there, what are the possibilities. And I'd like to believe that I got those entities like talking again, where they all, it's easy in any of that type of work in a rural area to become very discouraged. That they start to lose hope and start to believe that the next thing that's put in front of them could actually happen. And so, anything we can do as community members to support those type of people. So yeah, I'm excited 7 years later to be sitting down with those same people and hearing about the 5,000 miles of fiber optic that's going to be laid in the Eastern Upper Peninsula in the next 4 to 7 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's just awesome.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, on that positive note that we are improving. Thank you so much, Joanne. Thanks for all of the work that you do at the Center for Change. And thanks for stepping up and running in 2018 and sharing that experience with all of us. I think that there's a lot here for people to go home and process and finish your lunch up and think about. So for anybody who is interested in running for office, you can always reach out to Joanne. She's very, very accessible, as people know.
My phone number is right online. Grab it, call me, text me.
Yeah, and you can always talk with her at the Center of Change as well. And then if you want to join that organization, feel free to go to their website. And of course, we would love to have you as well in the League of Women Voters. So you can go to our website, lwveup.org, and you can email us if you have any questions, or if you want a direct link for this video, lwveup@gmail.com. And thank you so much for joining us. And we hope we will see you back next week on, what is that, April 14th at 7 p.m. for Dark Money. We also have a lot of other programs coming up as well. So make sure you check our website for those programs. But
who's speaking on the Dark Money?
Oh, you'd have to ask Paul. Paul is the one helping with a bunch of other leaguers organizing that. So I don't know. I'm support staff on this one, but
great. That's awesome. I'll look for that information and share it out. That's very important. Thank you, Amy. And thank you for inviting me today. It's been a blast.
Thanks. This was wonderful. So,
Okay.
all right. Well, thank you everybody. And hope to see you next week, if not later. Bye.